All right, so today I would like to, or I am going to go over some concepts or do a slight divination overview study type of situation regarding this book, Reforming Education, The Opening of the American Mind by Mortimer J. Adler. All right. So first, I will put the title of the book and the author in the caption. But first, I want to go to page. If you're not familiar with this method of bibliomancy or divination, you pretty much ask a question, or you don't have to ask a question, but you pick a random page and maybe a random paragraph, and from there, you pretty much see what insights you can gain without having to actually read the entire book. This is a perfect method when you want to get an overview of a book, but you don't have a lot of time. You can't read the whole book cover to cover. This is a great way to still get some insights regarding texts, right? So what I want to do first is make a list of pages that I'm going to look into. So and this is without looking at the pages first. I'm just going to go with the numbers that come to my head. 132 page. And also let me tell you, this book um was written in 1977. All right. So I'm going to do page 77, page 132, and page 205. All right. So first, let me go to page 77, and I'm going to tell you what chapter 77 is in. So chapter 77 is in chapter 5, which is entitled Tradition and Progress in Education, 1939. And I'm going to read the summary or the opening to this chapter. Like Horace, Adler advises his readers to seek the mean between extremes, the average. So basically, instead of black and white thinking, looking at the mean between extremes, right? In this case, the extremes are the excesses of classicism and of progressivism. So classicism would be the old school way of doing things. Progressivism would be the new school way of doing things. And so instead of saying you have to do things the old way or the new way, this is advocating for a middle ground. All right, Adler clarifies the role and order of both traditional and progressive studies in the curriculum and exposes the myths that support extremism in educational theory. The issues are decisive ones. All right. It says that the conditions of education have not, and neither, excuse me, while much has changed for the better, the conditions of education have not. And neither one is sorry to note has the intellectual climate that dominates education in America. It remains as stubbornly constant as human nature itself. And this is basically saying that education is stagnant. It is as stable. And if you think about natural law, it's something that's always going to occur, right? So this is basically saying like human nature follows a pattern, right? That is natural, that is always the case. And they're saying that you can compare education to this, that it's pretty much they're arguing that the classic system still kind of reigns and nothing is changing in education. So this book is about reform. I don't know the author's perspective, but I challenge you to think for just a second. What are some things that, off the top of your head, based on your own education, that you wish could have been different, right? And I'm going to say that for me, I wish that I had been assigned more readings and more diverse readings. And so I'm going to note that here too, because this is actually, I'm going to be going into a new work environment where I'll be working as a K-12 educator. And so I'm reading these education books and trying to brush up on education theory and philosophy, mainly to help with my career, but also I wanted to leave some type of legacy to my son, Remington Silva. I want him to one day be able to look at my videos and see like, hey, this is what mommy does when she's not around. So shout out to my son. And again, I think that the biggest thing I would change if I were the educator is to assign several different readings from several different perspectives. And I also would have loved to have a classics background because a lot of times when it comes to, I'm thinking like graduate school, we learned a lot about current research, but we only spent very little time talking about like ancient philosophy and the classics of criminology. And that's a book too, Criminology Classics, that eventually I'll cover. Another thing that I would probably change about education, would probably be the pace of it. I felt like my schooling was unnecessarily drawn out. I felt like I could have, completed the high school curriculum and middle school curriculum in a couple of years just because of the level that I was performing at, the level in which I was performing. So maybe the pace of education, I think maybe if we did more assessments of skill sets and, had more with diversity in terms of placements. So not just, special education or general education, but, within general education, seventh grade, but like maybe seventh grade A, seventh grade B. You have talented and gifted, but, sometimes even within talented and gifted, I think that having tests of students' strengths and weaknesses and conducting propensity score matching would be great as well. So back to page 77. All right. I'm going to read this entire page, which is something I don't usually do, but for some reason, that's what is coming to my mind. So it says, in terms of pragmatic positivism, the cultural tradition is ignored because there is nothing worth knowing except the most recent results of scientific research. Any book older than yesterday is hardly worth reading, for by the law of progress, we must have advanced to a new and better stage of knowledge. We must teach students how to face contemporary problems, and each generation must pull itself up by its own bootstraps, for the problems are ever changing and the past can afford no help at all. Because man is viewed as having only an animal career and not a human destiny, interest and adjustment have taken the place of discipline and cultivation as the watchwords of educational policy. The whole aim of education changes, for adjustment leads to the cult of success, the ideal of getting ahead by beating your neighbor. The emphasis on the interest of the student makes him a buyer instead of a patient, and the teacher becomes a salesman rather than a doctor prescribing the cure for ignorance and incompetence. It is the student who is the master under the elective system, which was invented because of the excessive proliferation of scientific courses in the curriculum and has been perpetuated by the perversion of educational policy, which makes the young, in other words, the relatively ignorant and incompetent, choose their own road to learning according to the fickle interests of their immaturity. Excuse me. Extracurricular activities originated in response to interests that were tangential to the main business of education, but in many schools they have become the curriculum and the substantial studies have been thrown out. They are not even extracurricular. Many college curriculums offer courses from A to Z without discrimination. And the university, instead of being a hierarchy of studies and a community of scholars, is a collection of specialties together only in geographical proximity. Elementary education is devoid of discipline. The basic routines in language and mathematics have been dropped or corrupted. Memory is not cultivated. Social studies, current events, manual arts, and games occupy the major time. Secondary or collegiate education fails even more, though in part the failure is due to the inadequate preparation given in the elementary schools. Our Bachelor of Arts cannot read, write, or speak their own language well. Neither they, nor for that matter, our Master of Arts are acquainted with the liberal arts. They cannot read and they have not read the great books in all fields. And that is how divination works. Remember, that's how the page ends. Remember, I said I would like to read more interdisciplinary or more diverse books. It says they cannot read and they have not read the great books in all fields. So, in other words, the author and I are kind of on the same page here, where it's like, education is kind of can be a little bit divisive and unilateral, where students are only learning very specific specialties, and instead of being trained as generalists, they are very niched in what they are learning. And also, I thought something that stood out was that extracurriculars are becoming, the focus. So now people are going to school on athletic scholarships, and the athleticism is more valued in some cases than the educational merit of the institution. Some institutions are known for their sports, and that's something that, if you ask an alien from space to come audit universities, they would wonder, what are sports even doing at universities, right? So let's dissect this page. So I read that, and I want to see if I can add a transcription. It says annotate. I don't see where I can let's get out of there. Let's see. Okay. Okay. It says, let me go back here. Post tools, captions, captions. It says show captions on the bottom of the show captions. Advanced. Not sure how to pause. Okay. All right. Not exactly sure why I don't see. Okay. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with this. But back to page 77. Okay. All right. So the first paragraph is basically saying that there are some schools of thought that argue that because time, time is sensitive, and because progression is key, or by the law of progress, we are always looking for the most updated, the most recent, the most accurate data, right? Our theories need to be as advanced and as relevant and recent as possible. That students should be taught to solve contemporary problems, as opposed to maybe having a grounded historical education, right? And so this is key. It says any book older than yesterday is hardly worth reading. So I guess what they're arguing here is that a foundation is important, and I would definitely agree. All right. Then I thought was also interesting is that this new climate allows the young, immature, ignorant individual to have elective powers over their education. So students who can barely, follow instructions given by instructors or teachers or professors are actually choosing their own curriculum. And some might argue, like, wait, the expert should choose what classes or what courses or what level of education these students, are subject to, because how could the student teach the master, in other words? And so in a sense where, especially where student evaluations determine promotions, how can, the student surpass the master without proper training? And it says, again, many college curriculums offer courses from A to Z without discrimination. And the university, instead of being a hierarchy of studies, in other words, letting some forms of study and some topics be more or less important than the others. It says that there's no community of scholars. It's just a collection of specialties together only in geographical proximity. In other words, even though there are different disciplines, there is not really much overlap in the different disciplines, and they kind of exist in isolation. And so they're saying basically that we need to rank these disciplines at universities, and also we need to have more overlap and interdisciplinary study. So what I'd like to do is see list ranking of disciplines from most to least important. And I want you to pay attention to the sources, right? It says the AI is saying there's no universal ranking of disciplines. This is something I know, but um, I want to see it's I'm having I'm having some trouble getting to the first few links don't tell me, straight up what the rankings are of the majors. Let's try this one. Americans rankings of 40 college majors. And let's see how um, civilians or, the public opinion ranks these majors. Hopefully this is not behind a paywall. Okay, so let's see. Overall, importance is defined by earning potential, interesting, how interesting it will be to study personally, and how well-rounded it makes a person. And so the majors that ranked highest overall in all three categories are business, psychology, they were tied, I believe, engineering, architecture, nursing, international relations, computer science, history, criminal justice, whoop, whoop, mechanical engineering. Okay. It'll be interesting to see, how these majors were ranked in each individual category of importance. And I'm going to copy and paste this link as well for the caption. The lowest overall rankings are kinesiology and physical therapy. I would have never thought that would be there. Performing arts, statistics, speech language pathology, that's a surprise as well. Public health, another surprise. Marketing, nutrition, social work, another surprise. Data science, art, and anthropology. Okay. And so the overall rank, number one is business. And when I was talking about the things that I wish that I would have done differently or the reforms that I wish I would have seen, I do wish that I would have majored in business. I was uninformed. I didn't know. And this is why the author's saying, when you're 18 or when you're 12 or 10 or 9 or 8, you shouldn't necessarily be making, important decisions about your future. You should probably be taking an aptitude test and maybe a personality test and be assigned a major or a curriculum or course of study based on your natural gifts, right, and your interests in earning potential. So if I could go back, I would have gone with business. um Let me copy and paste this link and put it in. Let's see if I can get a notepad. Keeping it old school. And we got to remember to put the title of this book in here too. And this is just one page. So you could imagine if I were to go through the entire book in one video, how long that would be. So I'm going to, a couple more things. So it says elementary education is devoid of discipline. The author is basically saying, most of the classroom culture is based on games, current events, and things that are not exactly ideal for a rigorous education. And so I had these three R's that research should be relevant, rigorous, and rational. That's just an aside, right? And it says here also that individuals going for their bachelor's and master's, you know, can't read, they don't know anything about the liberal arts. In other words, they're arguing that the training at every level is doing an inadequate job, preparing students for the next level of education. And as an educator at both, the K-12 and the university level, I definitely agree. And I also have perceived some cross-cultural differences in educational achievement, educational attachment, and just the overall approach to learning. And that begs the question, how do other countries view these topics? So let's look at international rankings of college majors. Okay, this is ranking, all of these are ranking the universities. Let me change that from major to disciplines. Okay, let's see. The AI is saying that engineering and technology, so not business, but engineering and technology are top, life sciences and medicine. Um, so it depends on what I'm looking for international. So Oxford in the UK, engineering and technology is the top ranked. Um, Also, Oxford, UK, life sciences and medicine. Also, Oxford and Cambridge, the arts and humanities. But I'm looking for a more detailed ranking. And so that's definitely, if you're looking for, um, okay, here we go. QS World University Rankings by Subject 2026 results. Let's see what we have here. Uh, this is ranking how well the universities are, or the reputation of the universities based on what you want to study. So let's pick, I want these by university. So let's see. I don't want these, let's see, by country. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, let's see. Well, let's just get some random facts here since research, public opinion, discipline, ranking, international sample survey. All right, so education rankings by country. Here we have Denmark with a perfect score, 100, in Honduras with a point 0.6 as the lowest. Um, After Denmark is Sweden with a 99.9, the United Kingdom with a 96.8, Finland, Germany, Canada, Norway, Japan, Switzerland. And let's see where the United States, the United States ranks 12th globally, excuse me, in education. The US performs well in higher education quality and research output. However, it lags in overall system efficiency, cost, and consistency in K-12 outcomes compared to top ranked countries. And so I'm going to also copy and paste this and the link to this finding. Okay, what's going on here? Something's glitching. Okay, we don't want Expedia. That's for sure. We're not looking for that. Okay, here we go. All right. So that's page 77. Let's see if anything else. And I think the takeaway here is the great books in all fields, right? And I'm going to I don't know, I don't think I can post a picture, but let me see if I can find a link to Mortimer Adler's list of great books. Post a link to that. Yes, I found a link to I don't know if it's a male or female, their reading list. Thinking as leverage. This looks like a pretty good blog. Let's see if all the books are on here. All right, yes, all actually more than 96. So this is here. I think my overall impression so far is that this book is definitely worth reading cover to cover. All right. So um that'll be all.